Excuse me,
Oh,
Laurie.
Mr. Brackett, I'm sorry, Mr. Brackett.
Oh, I didn't mean to startle you.
That's all right.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
What's up, everyone? I'm your host, Will, and you're listening to One Good Scare, the show where we explore our favorite horror movies. Today, we're jumping into my favorite horror movie of 2024, Late Night with the Devil. A quick confession before we dive in. I'm not a huge fan of found footage films. I think a lot of them are cliche and a bit boring, but every now and then, I find one that really catches my attention. A quick side note, you may hear a little bit of gravel in my voice. Yesterday, while I was swimming with the kids, my youngest son accidentally elbowed me right in the throat, and so even though I'm talking mostly fine, in my head I hear a little bit of a scratch, so if you hear it, that's what it's from. Don't forget to follow One Good Scare on Instagram at OneScarePod and on TikTok at One Good Scare Pod. And be sure to follow and leave a comment or two. I love interacting and discussing. Also, be sure to leave a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Pods. It lets me know you're enjoying the show, and that goes a long way to keeping it going. And finally, my goal with One Good Scare is not to replace your viewing experience. It's to enhance it. So if you've never seen Late Night with the Devil, my strong encouragement is to do that first, and then come back and give the show a listen. Of course, if you'd rather listen than watch, I appreciate that as well. Just remember, one good scare is one gigantic spoiler. Alright, it's time to settle in as we explore one of my favorite found footage films, Late Night with the Devil. So I already mentioned that Late Night with the Devil was my favorite horror movie of 2024. Now let me clarify. It's not a particularly scary movie, though there are a few terrific horror scenes scattered throughout. I think for me, this movie was just a ton of fun to watch, and it's one that you can watch and rewatch over and over again. It's not overly long, clocking in right at 90 minutes, and the pacing keeps you entertained and intrigued throughout. You know, some of my favorite horror movies explore deep themes and are analogies for real-world issues, emotions, and situations. But a lot of my favorite horror movies are as shallow as a puddle and don't have much to say beyond, here, enjoy this for an hour or two. Late Night with the Devil is that kind of movie, and it's exactly what it should be. Overall, it seems to have scored well with audiences and critics alike, scoring a 7 out of 10 on IMDb. A 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is terrific for any movie, let alone a horror movie, and a 4.2 out of 5 on Shudder. And here's the thing, Late Night with the Devil doesn't tread uncharted territory. Movies about demonic possession are a dime a dozen, and in a lot of cases, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. But, and this is a big but, it uses well-worn material in a fresh way. Film critic Corey Coleman stated, quote, "Late Night with the Devil takes familiar horror tropes and does wonders with them. This film has the potential to be a Halloween classic." End quote. And I think this is near consensus. David Dastmalchian is amazing in the lead role. Film critic Sonny Bunch highlighted Dastmalchian, stating, quote, "Late Night with the Devil is a great example of an absolute truth. The best special effect is an actor delivering a surprisingly great performance." End quote. But despite the high praise, the movie is not without its confusions and controversies. There are some who felt the ending was lacking, with one audience reviewer stating, quote, "Fun retro-styled indie movie. First 90% was great. The ending kind of flopped though with too much CGI and sloppy script writing." End quote. Another audience review stated, quote, "The end completely loses it with a series of surrealist scenes, which brings into question the entire found footage shown until then. The abrupt end basically leaves the job of story writing to the audience. Such a shame for what could have been an interesting film." End quote. Beyond the confusion, there is a not insignificant controversy surrounding the use of AI-generated images in the film. When the controversy was raised, the siblings who co-wrote and co-directed the film, Cameron and Colin Cairns, released a statement. I'll read it quickly. Quote, "In conjunction with our amazing graphics and production design team, all of whom worked tirelessly to give this film the 70s aesthetic we had always imagined, we experimented with AI for 3 still images, which we edited further and ultimately appear as very brief interstitials in the film. We feel incredibly fortunate to have had such a talented and passionate crew, cast, and producing team go above and beyond to help bring this film to life. We can't wait for everyone to see it for themselves this weekend." End quote. So I'll speak to this a little bit now. When you're watching the film, you'll notice it moves to commercial break a few times. In each of those instances, the title card showing messages like, "We'll be right back," "We're done with generative AI." The use of AI resulted in calls for boycotts of the film, though it seems to mostly have died down in the year plus since its release. Alright, it's just about time to jump into the movie. And I'll say this beforehand. I'll go through the scene-by-scene breakdown almost fully without doing the drop-ins. I may add a few comments here or there, but for the most part they'll be fewer than normal. Okay, it's time to settle down, turn down the lights, and enjoy the fun ride that is Late Night with the Devil. The film opens with a slow zoom in towards a tube television, static playing on the screen. What appears to be studio lights glow brightly in the background. As we get closer, the static turns to images of war, violence, and unrest in 1970s America. A voiceover tells us it was a time of fear and violence and Satan, and that the media beamed it into homes while also offering comfort amidst the chaos. In the form of the first episode of Night Owls, a late-night talk show hosted by Jack Delroy. The camera pans in as Jack delivers an opening monologue to the cheers and applause of the studio audience. The voiceover comes back in and tells us Night Owls becomes one of the most popular late-night talk shows in America, with Jack Delroy helping an anxious nation forget its troubles. In November 1972, Jack signs a 5-year contract and his star is quickly rising, with an Emmy nomination and a significant share of the late-night viewership. Jack seems to be on the fast track to stardom. Homage is paid to his wife, actress Madeline Piper, whose support for Jack is critical to his success. Except Jack has another support system, The Grove, a men's-only club in California. The club's membership includes politicians and entertainers, though rumors swirl around the club, as it is believed they have the power to make or break careers. 4 years into his contract, Jack's ratings still have not topped Johnny Carson's, whose hold on the late-night crown seems impenetrable. Jack continues to receive award nominations, but continues to lose out on the awards themselves. He quickly develops a reputation as a runner-up, which starts to get to him. Then, tragedy strikes when in September 1976, Madeline is diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. A month later, she appears on the show where she talks about how she and Jack first met. The episode is the highest rated in Night Owl's history, but still falls just short of topping Carson. Madeline dies 2 weeks later, and in grief, Jack turns away from the media as flashbulbs pop, hoping to catch his movements. Distraught, he leaves New York entirely, going to an unknown location. A month later, Jack makes his return to late-night television. But despite this, Night Owls continues to come in second in the ratings to Johnny Carson. Producers resort to unusual tactics to drum up ratings, but nothing works. Guests humiliate him, and ratings tumble just as Jack's contract is set to expire. On Halloween night 1977, Jack plans a special episode that he hopes will right the ship. We then find out that the footage we are about to be shown is, quote, the master tape of what went to air that night, as well as previously unreleased behind-the-scenes footage, end quote. The special episode was entitled Late Night with the Devil. A countdown brings us to the broadcast, which is live from UBC Studios in New York City. The guests for the evening include Christou, Carmichael Hague, Dr. June Ross Mitchell with the subject of her new book, Lily, and Miss Cleo James. Jack is introduced to the studio audience, but doesn't answer the opening curtain. Concerned about where he is, Jack pops up behind Gus, his assistant, in a white sheet with the eyes cut out. The studio loves it, and Jack takes center stage to deliver his opening monologue, and apparently there will be some creepy stuff in store for the evening. Jack banters with Gus before turning to the audience to get them hyped up, and he pleads playfully with them to love the show he has in store, as it is Sweeps Week. Okay, so I actually had to do some research into Sweeps Week, and it turns out it was a real thing. One article stated, quote, "In popular culture, Sweeps Week is shorthand for brazen attempts to lure in viewers using every TV trick in the book." End quote. A more technical definition is the period when viewership is measured to determine ratings and advertising. Connected to the movie, with Night Owl struggling in the ratings, high viewership during the Sweeps Week could boost both ratings and advertising dollars. Okay, back to the movie. Jack and Gus continue bantering as he briefly explains Sweeps Week. Jack thanks the viewers and audience for sticking with him during the good times and bad. He then moves into the introduction for the show, telling viewers that interest in the occult is at an all-time high. As he introduces his first guest, Jack implores everyone to keep an open mind. He welcomes Christu, who is described as a spiritualist and/or medium. Christu makes his way towards Jack, shaking his hand. The two exchange pleasantries, and Jack mentions Halloween is a special night for someone in Christu's profession. Christu agrees, and explains it's a night to break open the doors to the underworld. Christu goes into a monologue, explaining that it's a chance for the recently deceased to attend to any unfinished business. Christu says he is constantly hearing the voices of the dead, to which Jack asks, "How the hell do you get any sleep?" Christu says his mind is like a ham radio, and he is able to switch off the frequencies when he wants to. Jack, though, wants to turn the frequencies up and gives the floor to Christu, who begins channeling something. Christu says he's hearing the letter P, for Peter or Pete, or maybe Peterson. Someone from the crowd yells, "Peterman." Jack rushes over, and the audience member says his wife's maiden name is Peterman. Christu confirms she is in the room, but the audience member seems confused. His wife is now crossed over. She simply ran out with a neighbor a few years back. Christu is flustered momentarily and says he is hearing the name Elizabeth, but the audience member says his wife's name was Helen, and he continues badgering Christu, who is growing visibly frustrated. There's something interesting. With a switch in camera angles, we see the man is sitting next to someone in a full skeleton costume, including a mask. He just sits there silently, watching. Christu tries to switch gears, apologizing and saying the spirit is gone. Jack has the audience members sit down and speaks to the person dressed in the skeleton costume, joking that he got his costume with Gus at Barney's Discount Costume Warehouse. The skeleton just stares at him silently. Suddenly, Christu says he's getting a signal, and he approaches several ladies in the front row. He asks them, "Who is Edward?" One of the ladies responds, "Edmund was my little brother." Christu says that something bad happened to him, and that he died by suicide. The women affirm these details, and Christu tries to comfort them by saying Edmund is at peace now. Christu says he's now receiving the word Papa, to which one of the women says that Edmund used to have a teddy bear named Papa. The women are now in tears as they converse with Christu, who offers comfort. The audience is stunned, and Jack hypes them up with a round of applause. As Jack moves to a commercial break, Christu suddenly screams, putting his hand to his head. Jack is unsure of what to do, but Christu says something intense is coming through. He continues screaming, and he says he's getting the name Minnie. Jack implores the audience, but no one accepts Christu's plea. He continues, saying the spirit needs to talk to whoever knows Minnie. And the lights flash on and off as his eyes roll to the back of his head and he falls to his knees. Jack tries to settle the crowd down as Christu comes to, saying, "She's gone." Jack cuts to commercial break as the camera pans to the person in the skeleton costume. During the break, Jack helps Christu gather himself, and Gus tries to talk with Jack. Gus is concerned about an upcoming guest, but Jack simply brushes him off. Christu asks for a glass of water, and Jack is pulled aside by his producer Leo. The two talk about Christu's performance, with both thinking the other pulled one over on the audience. Leo tells Jack a few important people are sitting in the front row, and that they want to meet him. They agree to meet with him during the next commercial break. Christu is on edge as the show returns, and Jack tells him to pay the next guest no mind. Jack recaps Christu's segment and introduces his next guest, Carmichael Haig, a leader in the skeptic movement. Carmichael steps on stage and sits between Jack and Christu, pulling out a cigar, making it disappear, and bringing it back, before lighting it up. Carmichael was formerly known as Carmichael the Conjurer. Jack sings his praise, which he gladly accepts, but in recent years, his time and energy have been given to IFSIP, the International Federation of Scientific Investigation into the Paranormal. It's their mission to investigate the paranormal and determine what is trickery and what may be genuine. Jack asks Carmichael, "What's the harm in believing the mysterious?" Carmichael responds, "Though the world would be more interesting if people can talk to the dead, he's a skeptic because he doesn't have irrefutable proof of the paranormal." Jack asks Carmichael if he still carries the check for $100,000, which would be given to an individual who can provide proof of the supernatural. Christu states he won't take Carmichael's money, to which Carmichael accuses Christu of being a swindler. Suddenly, Christu begins coughing, requiring a full glass of water to settle down. Jack asks Carmichael to explain Christu's reading from before the break, and Carmichael says that Christu is an accomplished performer. He says Christu failed or flopped at least 5 times. Jack rebuts this, pointing to the fact that the entire audience was witness to the reading. Carmichael continues his rejection of Christu, who lashes out by saying Carmichael is spewing false lies. Carmichael calls him a liar, a cheat, a charlatan, and a fake. Christu tosses a glass of water in Carmichael's face before trying to storm off the set. Jack tells him they need to discuss the last reading, where Christu claimed to hear a spirit named Minnie. Christu, though, finds the sliding door locked and begins coughing once more. Jack stands up and says he believes the last reading may have been meant for him. Christu asks him, "Who is Minnie?" Jack says Minnie is the private nickname for his recently deceased wife, Madeline. He's an unmarried man wearing a wedding ring. Carmichael says the death of Jack's wife was well known and accused Jack of being a fool. While Carmichael talks, Christu is having some kind of reaction, gasping before collapsing on the stage. As Jack walks over to him, Christu vomits all over Carmichael. Jack immediately calls for a commercial break, and Christu vomits all over the camera. And this is the end of Act 1. Alright, so to this point, the pacing is pretty brisk. It seems to be setting us up for a worthwhile payoff. Christu, while compelling, obviously isn't the star of the show, but that doesn't mean he's unimportant, because the reference to Jack's recently deceased wife is a major plot point that lingers for the rest of the movie. More than anything, we're watching David Dastmalchian go to work. He's charismatic and compelling, and his range is really impressive. And Carmichael is appropriately annoying. Honestly, you really grow to hate him as the movie wears on, and especially towards the climax. He's a pain in the ass now, but later he becomes damn near insufferable. But that's the point, and actor Ian Bliss understood the assignment. maybe a little too well. Now, I'm a full-fledged believer in the paranormal. There's just too much strange and inexplicable shit out there. But if there's one part of me that leans skeptical, it's with mediums. Okay, don't hear what I'm not saying. It's not that I think it's fake. It's that I wonder how common it really is. I'm sure many, or maybe most of you, are on social media, and I constantly see folks claiming these kinds of powers. I'm not passing judgment. I'm simply asking the questions. Is it real? And if so, how does it work? Okay, back to the movie. While on break, an assistant comes over to help Christou, whose mysterious ailment is only worsening. Gus talks to the audience as Lou, Jack, and others try to clean things up. As Jack collects himself, Carmichael berates him as if he is in on some sort of hoax. Carmichael says there's 3 ways Christou could have known about Madeline. 1, he's psychic. 2, he got lucky. And 3, Jack was in on it. Carmichael essentially accuses him of this to drum up ratings, and then he makes a veiled reference to the Grove. Carmichael presses Jack about the organization, with hopes of becoming a part. The show returns from break, with Jack and Carmichael seated next to one another. Jack reassures viewers that Christou is receiving medical attention backstage. The two banter about Christou's legitimacy. When Jack says to keep the check handy, Carmichael tells him to look in his jacket pocket, where the check has mysteriously been placed. Jack hands him the check and says he will see it again. As Jack prepares to introduce his next guest, an ambulance is heard in the background. Collecting himself, Jack monologues about Dr. June Ross Mitchell, author of Conversations with the Devil, which he believes will challenge a few skeptics. Jack shows viewers a clip from Dr. Ross Mitchell's research group. The clip shows a house which is the first church of Abraxas, during a worship service of some type, being led by the group's leader, Xander Diebo. An interview with Diebo reveals the group believes in pleasure for its own sake, yet that pleasure comes with a price, some kind of sacrifice. Dr. Ross Mitchell says the FBI had begun investigating the group due to claims of child sacrifice. She claims that anyone who witnesses the ritual will become possessed by the demon Abraxas. In 1974, authorities raided the house, leading to a 3-day siege, during which Diebo and his followers set the house and themselves on fire. All are killed, with the exception of a 10-year-old girl, Lily. She has difficulty remembering what went on in the house, and some speculate that she may have been spared purposely. Sometime after she was saved, Dr. Ross Mitchell is contacted to meet with Lily, and the two connect immediately, leading to breakthroughs in progress. A recording of Dr. Ross Mitchell's first session with Lily reveals something strange, and as she asks if the demon Abraxas is present, Lily can be heard screaming and growling. The tape cuts short almost immediately. Jack introduces Dr. Ross Mitchell and Lily to the studio audience. Lily is initially hesitant before coming out to greet everyone. She shakes Jack's hand and sits down. Jack welcomes her and she says, "Thank you, Mr. Delroy. I'm so glad you could join us too." Except she's staring directly into the camera when she says it, prompting Jack to encourage her to speak directly to him. Jack immediately starts in with the questions, asking Lily if she's ever seen his show. She says no, but also that she knows who he is. She adds, "June says you're very handsome, Jack." Dr. Ross Mitchell stumbles a bit as Lily mentions the death of Jack's wife. Lily attempts to offer comfort for his loss, and Dr. Ross Mitchell cuts in to offer some context. Lily continues, "And you needn't worry about your TV show. I think you're going to be very famous soon." Jack plays this off with Gus before cutting to a commercial break. Lily stares over her shoulder, directly at a camera. During the break, Jack attempts to make small talk with Lily, who responds by staring into the camera again. Jack gets up to have his makeup refreshed when a familiar voice speaks to him. It's his wife Madeline, except the voice is coming from Lily. Stunned, Jack responds, while Dr. Ross Mitchell asks to speak to him. She cautions him about having Lily on the show, saying she's becoming more unpredictable. Jack nudges back, saying it'll be great for live TV, and that it'll help her book sales. Dr. Ross Mitchell clarifies, saying that while in a trance the day before, Lily started saying Jack's name. Jack tries to brush this off, but Dr. Ross Mitchell says it was as if she was trying to recall something. Jack pushes back by encouraging her to continue on with the show. But there's a strange familiarity between them, almost intimate, as Jack moves his face closer to hers. The two go back and forth before she walks back out on the stage. Lou and Jack go back and forth, with Jack saying he's handling it. He's agitated and walks away, but Lou follows him and says he just got a call from the hospital. Christou is dead. He had a hemorrhage in the ambulance and died. Jack is beside himself and says it needs to be kept quiet. As the camera pans, we see Carmichael speaking to the two ladies from earlier. They tell him they filled out a questionnaire prior to coming on set and that a woman, the same one who helped Christou, asked a bunch of questions. Carmichael thanks them while puffing on his cigar. As Jack sits down, Lily asks if he's okay. He says yes. Now back from commercial break, Jack speaks to Dr. Ross Mitchell and says, quote, "You call yourself a parapsychologist," end quote. But before he can continue, she cuts him off and says that's what she is, and that she has a PhD. Carmichael cuts in with a snide comment, and she corrects him by saying she graduated from Stanford. She questions Carmichael's presence, and Jack turns to him and asks him to settle down. Dr. Ross Mitchell continues, mentioning various paranormal phenomena, including demonic possession. Jack asks if she believes Lily is possessed, and Dr. Ross Mitchell details her work with Lily for the past 3 years. She all but confirms that Lily is possessed by a lesser demon who serves Abraxas. She continues, but Carmichael cuts her off. She counters by saying that only the most closed-minded people greet new ideas with ridicule, to the applause of the studio audience. Jack reroutes by showing a few items from Dr. Ross Mitchell's private collection. Carmichael picks up a dagger and pretends an unseen force is attempting to stab him with it. He tells the viewers to turn off their TV sets before Abraxas claims their souls, and then immediately places the dagger on the table. Carmichael says Abraxas is the ultimate showman, and that he craves an audience, much like a magician. Jack redirects to Lily, asking her about the name she has for the thing that lives inside of you. Lily calls him Mr. Wriggles, because he wriggles his way inside her head, and then wriggles his way out. Suddenly, eerie music plays, and Jack calls to Gus, who seems a bit surprised by it. He walks over to the control board, which shorts out when he touches it. The studio audience winces as feedback blares in their ears. The table in front of Jack starts rattling, and glasses shatter from the PA system. Lily says it was Mr. Wriggles, and Carmichael rebuts, saying, "If you insist, little one." Lily asks why he is so condescending, but Jack asks if Mr. Wriggles is here now. Lily says he is, and Jack wants to bring him out of Lily, to the horror of Dr. Ross Mitchell. Carmichael and Lily both seem to want this to happen, as does the studio audience. Dr. Ross Mitchell looks angrily at Jack, who says, "The people have spoken." She reluctantly agrees, but requires the full cooperation of everyone in the room. As Jack cuts to commercial break, he tells the viewers they're going to attempt to communicate with the devil. During the break, Dr. Ross Mitchell angrily confronts Jack, who tells her it's a prime opportunity to prove the skeptics wrong. She turns her back to Jack as Lily is prepped. Gus pulls Jack aside and cautions him against conjuring Satan. Jack gives him permission to leave if he likes. Gus persists, but Jack says he's trying to save the show. Gus tells him he knows about Christu's death and believes Mr. Wriggles may be behind it. Jack pleads with him to keep it together, but Gus counters by asking him to stop the show immediately. Now back from break, Dr. Ross Mitchell is seated across from Lily, and she begins by telling the audience and viewers to remain calm if the entity comes through. It's important to keep Lily focused on her and her alone. She begins the ritual by having Lily look at her and then instructing her to close her eyes. Lily does this, and Dr. Ross Mitchell instructs her to let herself sleep and relax. Lily's head falls to her chest, her face shrouded in darkness. Dr. Ross Mitchell calls to Lily, then asks to speak to Mr. Wriggles. No response from Lily. Dr. Ross Mitchell starts to address Mr. Wriggles, when suddenly the camera blurs slightly and Lily's chair shifts aggressively. The audience gasps, and Dr. Ross Mitchell instructs them to stay quiet. The chair thuds again, and as she asks who is present, Lily begins to struggle and groan in her seat. Dr. Ross Mitchell says, "Please let yourself be known." And within a second or two, a guttural laugh comes from Lily. Dr. Ross Mitchell commands it to speak, and a demonic voice responds, "You know who I am, Doctor." Lily slowly picks up her head, revealing a different face. She's now possessed by a demon, and as she looks at the audience, she asks them who they are. The demon's voice asks its purpose, and it responds, "He's here, isn't he?" Before turning to Jack and saying, "It's good to see you again, Jack." Jack doesn't seem to understand, but the demon says they go way back. Dr. Ross Mitchell calls to Lily, but the demon rebukes her, saying, "Be careful now. You know what happened to his last whore. She died. She died an ugly, ugly death." Lily has a large scratch on the side of her mouth, and her eyes have changed color. The demon continues, accusing Jack of sleeping with Dr. Ross Mitchell. The doctor responds by calling Lily back, but the demon continues mocking Jack and Dr. Ross Mitchell. Angered, the doctor slaps Lily across the face, and this seems to bring her back, as Lily's voice returns to normal. But when Dr. Ross Mitchell gets up to check, the demon lashes out, almost biting her. Jack gets up, but is instructed to stay where he is. Dr. Ross Mitchell takes out a talisman of some sort and begins reciting something in Latin. The demon laughs at her, and as Dr. Ross Mitchell switches to English, it recites the incantation along with her. The demon then looks at Jack and asks, "How could you let it happen, Jack?" Suddenly, an electrical charge runs through the lights in the studio, and Lily's chair begins levitating before settling back to the ground. Lily returns, and when she does, the demon is gone. Jack asks the audience, "Have you ever seen anything like that?" Carmichael immediately gets up, saying there were a few tricks employed by the doctor. Jack cuts him off and goes to commercial break. During the break, Carmichael chastises Jack, who is busy checking in with Lily and Dr. Ross Mitchell. Jack tells her it was amazing and that they need to come back on. Dr. Ross Mitchell questions him about Lily's comments, but Jack puts it back on her. Jack goes to help Lily with the arm restraints as Dr. Ross Mitchell helps settle her down. Gus tells Lou that they're meddling, but he's sent back to do his job. On the way, he runs into Carmichael and says they should have ended the show after Christu died. Carmichael, not knowing about this, redirects, but Gus clarifies, saying Christu actually died in the ambulance. Carmichael is stunned. As Jack preps to return after break, Lou tells him the ratings are skyrocketing, and Jack is giddy. He can see his dreams coming to fruition. For a moment, though, Jack seems bothered, and he asks Lou how Lily could sound like his dead wife. Lou redirects and tells Jack to focus before he heads back on stage. And this is the end of Act 2. As the show returns from break, Jack apologizes for causing any offense with the demonic possession of Lily. He has her reassure the audience, and she says that it was like she was awake and asleep at the same time, and that she simply tries to focus on Dr. Ross Mitchell's voice. Carmichael cuts in, and he and Dr. Ross Mitchell go back and forth, with her saying she gave Lily love and compassion. Carmichael says there is no demon inside Lily, but instead, that she was hypnotized. Jack cuts in and asks how Lily's voice and face could change, and what about the levitation? Carmichael says it was all stagecraft, to which Jack says Carmichael is, quote, a self-righteous, cold-hearted curmudgeon, end quote, who doesn't want to give up $500,000. Carmichael responds by asking Gus to volunteer at center stage. Carmichael sets up 2 chairs, with Jack giving him 5 minutes to prove his point. Carmichael sits across from Gus and asks to have the lights dimmed. Carmichael tells Gus and the audience to relax before pulling out a watch, which he turns into a swirling vortex. He asks everyone to stare into the watch, and after a few seconds, Gus seems drowsy, and Carmichael snaps his fingers and pulls the watch away. He addresses Gus and asks about his vermophobia, his morbid fear of worms. Gus seems surprised that Carmichael knows about this. The two continue talking, and Carmichael asks Gus if he realizes he's in a deep trance. Gus says he does not. Carmichael snaps his fingers, and Gus falls under his spell. Gus says he's in the studio with Carmichael and that he feels fine. He hears some strange noise as eerie music plays in the background. Gus gets up and complains about the heat before taking off his jacket. He says his skin is itchy as he unbuttons his shirt. He scratches, and Carmichael points out a cut on Gus's neck, which he says he got from shaving. Gus grabs at the wound and suddenly pulls out a worm from his neck. Gus unbuttons his shirt, saying he can feel the worms inside of him. Suddenly, he rips open his stomach and worms ooze out. Jack and Dr. Ross Mitchell are stunned, but Lily is laughing. The audience gasps as Carmichael winks at the camera. He snaps his fingers, but Gus continues in his trance. Carmichael is stunned himself, and as he watches helplessly, Gus's head swells and his eye pops out of the socket, a large worm bursting through. Carmichael then says, "Dreamer, here, awake." And just like that, everything is back to normal. Gus comes to and realizes his shirt is unbuttoned. He says he feels fine and seems embarrassed at his clothing situation. Jack is stunned that Gus doesn't remember the worms. Jack addresses Carmichael and says he did the same thing as Dr. Ross Mitchell. He simply hypnotized everyone. Carmichael seems pleased with himself as Jack asks for the video to be replayed. The video shows Gus was hypnotized, with Carmichael suggesting the heat and discomfort, the itchy skin and the wound on his neck, and the worms in his belly. Gus is embarrassed at the realization that he was duped. Jack polls the audience, with a few saying they didn't see the worms, but most falling under Carmichael's spell. For her part, Dr. Ross Mitchell claims she didn't hypnotize anyone, and Lily chimes in asking that they replay that part of the show as well. The audience agrees, and Jack prompts the video to be pulled up. Dr. Ross Mitchell wants to leave, but Lily presses her to stay. The video replay shows the demon possessing Lily, and the demon voice coming through loud and clear. Carmichael stumbles over his words, but Jack asks for a specific segment to be played back slowly, and a frame-by-frame analysis shows the ghost of Madeline in the frame, her arm resting on Jack's shoulder. Carmichael reacts aggressively, accusing Jack of setting the whole thing up, conspiring with Christou, and using the video recording as his evidence. As everyone is sitting there, Lily begins spasming and the sound of electric crackling is heard. Jack asks for help, but the lights in the studio flash on and off before going off for a few seconds. When they flash back on, Lily is standing with one arm forward and the other up towards the ceiling, streaks of electricity running to and from each arm. Gus screams for Leo to cut the show as Lily screams in agony. Suddenly, Lily's head splits open, flames and electricity bursting forth. The audience and crew members run for cover and escape. Gus yells, "The power of Christ compels you," while Dr. Ross Mitchell moves slowly towards Lily. As Gus continues yelling, Lily, who is now the demon, turns and glares at him, causing his neck to turn 180 degrees and killing him instantly. Jack rushes over as Gus falls onto the table on the stage. Dr. Ross Mitchell tries to get Lily's attention, but when she does, the demon forces the necklace to choke her, lifting her off the ground. Jack is thrown across the stage, but Carmichael falls to his knees and pledges to worship and serve the demon. Suddenly, the necklace around the doctor's neck slices her from ear to ear, killing her. Carmichael now realizes the gravity of the situation, and he takes the check out of his jacket pocket. The demon says, "Abracadabra," and the check evaporates. Carmichael then burns from the inside out, with Jack watching in horror as he melts away. Lou pulls Jack aside as Lily rages. Suddenly, the camera fades to static, and a demon face is shown in the picture. A cutaway scene says, "Station difficulties." A few seconds later, Gus introduces Jack to an admiring crowd. Except Jack is hesitant and uncertain about how he got there. Gus banters with him as the studio audience laughs. Suddenly, the laughter stops and it's completely silent. Gus is staring at Jack. A quick cutscene shows Jack in a caveman costume, likely doing a bit in a previous show. Jack calls for Leo, and another segment shows a guest holding a huge earthworm near him. Another scene shows Madeline, sick but still alive, as she talks about the first time she and Jack met at one of her shows. Her tone turns accusatory, as Jack says, "You're dead." The cutaway scene says once again, "Station difficulties," before melting down onto the screen. Another scene shows Jack watching as a lady spins a wheel with a hypnotist vortex. Jack walks towards the screen, yelling at viewers to turn off their television sets. The audience laughs as the camera flashes between scenes and faces. Finally, it settles on a face-on shot of Jack signing a UBC contract, with a journalist asking, "What did you have to sacrifice to get here tonight?" The exec says, "Jack Delroy's greatest sacrifice is yet to come." A bell rings, and two masked individuals lift Jack out of the chair and move him through the UBC studio before settling in a room with other individuals. The person in the skeleton costume from earlier is there, as is Xander Diebo, who tells Jack it was a great show and that ratings hit a 40 or 50 share. He turns Jack to face the group, and an individual in a large owl mask stands there with arms outstretched. Jack drinks from a goblet, as the others chant and cheer. As the camera pans, we see a door open, leading to a room where Madeline is lying in bed. She reaches for Jack, who sits in an armchair, and she says they told him he could have it all and be number one, but that he had to pay a price. She tells him she was the price, and Jack responds by saying he didn't know it would be her. She tells him his soul still belongs to them, and he claims that he didn't know it would end like this. Jack is now on his own. He sobs as he tells Madeline that he loves her. She asks him to do one last thing. The pain is agonizing as she pleads with him. He reaches for a bedside table and grabs a dagger, which he then plunges into Madeline's heart. As he looks down at the blood, Jack screams, and the camera pulls away to reveal Jack has stabbed Lily, who is now lying lifeless in the chair at the studio. The camera pans away to show everyone, Gus, Carmichael, Dr. Ross Mitchell, all dead. Jack says again and again, "Dreamer, here, awake." Finally, the camera cuts out, and the words "End of transmission, it is done" show on the bottom left corner. Late Night with the Devil has finally come to an end. Alright, so first things first, congratulations, you've made it through my favorite horror movie of 2024. But you may be asking yourself, is this really a found footage movie? The end may throw you for a loop, but in the most technical sense, I think it is. Even though the ending makes it seem like we're watching as the events unfold, it all seems to be footage that leaves us looking at past events in the present day. Okay, but what about the ending? I know there was some criticism about the end, but for me it was one of my favorite parts, because I think it showcased David Dastmalchian's acting range. First things first, the ending is pretty ambiguous. We know Jack kills at least Lily, but it's sort of open-ended as to whether he killed everyone on set. We know he was manipulated to sacrifice Lily as part of his Faustian deal to gain fame and jump in the ratings. But what we don't know, and perhaps even what Jack didn't know, was the actual cost of Jack's ambition. For some people, the end is unsatisfying, but I really loved it, and I thought it worked perfectly. Again, because David Dastmalchian shows us a character who is unaware of the ripple effects of his decisions. And Jack says as much in the closing scene, while talking with Madeline. He just didn't know what it would cost him. The nuance of Dastmalchian's performance makes the ending work, maybe even more than it should, because it's entirely believable that Jack would not realize what he'd done in killing Lily, and possibly the others, only because Jack seems both ambitious and hesitant and ignorant throughout. An interesting question that I've seen on social media was about the identity of the skeleton. He does show up a few times, most notably at the beginning, and at the end when Jack is amongst the group led by Xander Diebo. Some think the skeleton is representative of the devil who has come to collect on Jack's sacrifice. Others believe it's a cult member who is making sure Jack follows through. I think the skeleton is symbolic of all the evil shit that's about to happen, a sort of guidepost that some terrible, awful, scary, demonic chaos is about to unfold. Also, and I didn't mention this throughout the scene-by-scene recap, but if you look closely, there are at least 6 instances where the ghost of Madeline shows up in the frame of the movie. Some are more obvious than others, but I really want you to go back and watch with a careful eye to see if you can spot them. Before we close the episode, I always like to do this part. It's actually one of my favorite portions of the show. I mentioned that I'm not a huge fan of found footage films, though I'll admit I've seen a few recently that have been terrific. A few days before this recording, I asked folks on TikTok, Instagram, and Threads to tell me their favorite found footage films. Here are their responses. From Queer Horror High, the movie Wreck. The claustrophobia of the single location setting, coupled with the story unfolding in real time with few edits, really ratcheted up the tension. And the final scene using real night vision was terrifying. It's also one of the only found footage films to fully justify its found footage conceit to the audience. Those events made sense being recorded. From Tequila_Siren, the Collinswood story. It just grabbed me from the first time I saw it. From Gory Rory, I, Deadstream. From Mike and Serial X, Live Screamers. I loved that it was about screen life, about gamers, betrayal, and had great social commentary and diverse characters. From Bloody_Scream_Queen, The Blair Witch Project followed by Wreck. From Attack of the Killer Objects, Noroi, The Curse. From TPI, BOTE, Grave Encounters. From Dabbin.Birdie, The Taking of Deborah Logan. From Halloween Babies Podcast, Savage Land. It's a mockumentary and a found footage film. The footage just happens to be photographs, and they are so disturbing. From Jax_Bronte. Wreck. Horror in the High Desert. Never Hike Alone. Cloverfield. The Bay. And Lake Mungo. From Satir_John. I've seen basically every found footage film, from The Connection to Deadstream. My favorite is Grave Encounters, but Cannibal Holocaust is pretty fucked and worth seeing just for the gore factor. I also thought Hell House LLC was pretty good. From KM Jurassic. Cloverfield. From Warman ND. Off the Beaten Path. From Casket Club Merch. I like Blair Witch, mainly for the atmosphere. Watching modern found footage films, I always notice the fake shaky camera work, which manages to capture important details or events, whereas Blair Witch had awful framing because they were genuinely running in fear. From Found Footage Nerd. Wreck. Brilliant pacing, brilliant tone, brilliant sound, brilliant tension. It's just brilliant. From Jeremy.Luke.Alderman.Fiction. The Last Exorcism is my pick. I'm not sure it's an exceptional film in any way, except that for the first time I watched it, it scared the crap out of me. Sometimes all it takes for a movie to become a classic is for it to hit you just right at just the right time. From John_Waters_enthusiast. Hell House LLC was the most realistic found footage since Blair Witch. A lot of found footage seems forced and inauthentic, but this one feels like it really happened. From Dirty Water Devil 444. Hell House LLC. The acting is actually very good. The interviews interspersed sounded authentic. Clowns are scary. From Chandra_M_Jordan. Blair Witch. From Eric Pavlat. Noroi, The Curse. From Real Talk. I love the original Blair Witch Project. I have to mention the OG Cannibal Holocaust. I also enjoyed Creep, the original Paranormal Activity, and Cloverfield. And lastly, from Isabella Is Here 13. Late Night with the Devil. As always, a huge thank you to everyone who commented. Also, Real Talk is a terrific movie review podcast that is actually 3 shows. If you haven't listened yet, I can't recommend it enough. Alright, that's a wrap for this episode. As always, thank you for spending your time with me on One Good Scare. I don't take it for granted. And of course, be sure to join me next episode as we dive headfirst into one of my favorite horror movies of all time, The Witch, directed by Robert Eggers and starring Anya Taylor-Joy. Till next time, I'm your host Will. Thanks for hanging out.